Welcome to today's video in which we're going to be talking about the top 5 stunners in Dragon Ball Z Dokkan Battle. So I hope you enjoy and subscribe if you're new, of course. Now, what I want to do is I want to start the video off with the honorable mentions. Now, there are a lot of stunners in the game. I just tried to make this list more or less a blend between the most consistent stunners, because obviously a lot of these units have stun rates and it depends on where they proc at, but a lot of that stuff is kind of determined by the game. But nonetheless, I tried to make this list of the most consistent stunners, which obviously I could just say, hey, so-and-so has a higher percentage than so-and-so, so that means that they automatically are the top 5. But what I tried to do from there was branch off and then look at passives and things like that to try to indicate which units as a whole, at face value, regardless of the respective teams, regardless of links for the most part, are more consistent stunners and better all-around fits for teams if you're trying to build a team around stunning. So all this stuff is 100% open to interpretation. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start off with the honorable mentions. I wanted to scroll specifically like way down here to all the units that have like a 25 to 20 and below stun chance. They just simply, like you see some of your favorite characters in here, Ultimate Gohan, Arale, Hit, they don't have consistent enough super attack stuns for 2 turns to really make the list. Now, these 3 units in particular right here in the middle, these 3 intelligence ones, they also have passives for stunning, which means that their super attack stunning was going to be rare either way, because their super attack one is a high chance. But as you see, it's 40% for 1 turn. My phone just went off, excuse me for that. 40% for 1 turn isn't enough either, and that's kind of useless in some scenarios, because if you need to, like, if you're running one of these units and you put them at the end of the field to block or whatever, you know, you put them in that second or third slot and they're not getting attacked, you know, they're going to attack the enemy, get the stun off, but the enemy's not even attacking anymore, and it's only for 1 turn. So doesn't really do you much good a lot of the time unless you're going to purposely put them first, which I hope you have type advantage, because if you don't get that stun, you're going to look kind of dumb. So let's go ahead and get started with the list. So also honorable mention to, because this is going to be a guy that's a little higher, to some of these guys that don't make the list in 50% range and above. This guy right here, Triumphant Goku. Honestly, I went back and forth with him because I know that a lot of people are going to like him and I didn't want to make people mad, but at the same time I just felt like he's probably number 6, in which he's going to be right outside the bubble, and he's going to be like right there with my number 5 choice as a 5B to the number 5 being 5A. You know, I looked at him and I was like, you know, 50% stun chance, he has solid links for the most part, he has a standard Super Saiyan package, got a nice key multiplier, stuns for 2 turns. The passive can be nice, but the problem with the passive, the one thing that made him not come in number 5 is when HP is 80% or above. That means simply if you get knocked 1 time or a couple attacks, you get immediately below that. And for example, if you're running him with Buhan, I need to make this clear. If you're running him with a unit that heals like Buhan, this stuff activates before Buhan can heal. So it doesn't make a difference. You're literally going to spawn. If he spawns and you're below 80%, you know, his passive doesn't activate, in which he's not going to hit very hard or, you know, tank as well as he could. So, you know, he's number 6, if that means anything to you in this top 5 list. So, hope you enjoy. Let's get started. Number 5 is Evil Evolution Buu, Kid Buu, fused with Babidi from the Dragon Ball Heroes banner, which may or may not come to global. I don't know if it will. 50% stun chance. Lower key multiplier than the Goku has. Obviously, he doesn't have the same link set. He's not a Super Saiyan. In fact, this unit has particularly bad links for the most part, separate from being like an all Majin-based team. Like, I even tried to run him on Mono Intelligence. Unless you run like Turles and stuff, he's not going to super attack, which does kind of look at, you know, you can look at that as a detriment, but I tried to, like I said, stay away from link skills and just try to look at the super attack, the passive for the most part, and the stun chance, of course, to make up these units. And what really sets this unit above the Goku, in my opinion, is because when you look at it, 30% is higher than 3000 attack because of the way that the game works now. And this is the problem with units that have passives that just give them a flat attack boost versus one that has, you know, 3000 attack. Because for example, we were talking about Gogeta in the video I did with Alex not too long ago. We're like, man, Gogeta is so good already, but he would be so much better if his passive was just 70% instead of 7000 attack. And people are like, well, it kind of equates to being like 70%, but I'm like, it's not. That's the point, because it activates post leader skills. So if you're on a Moto team, that's 140% on top of the base stat for the attack stat, and then you just simply add a flat 7,000 more as opposed to 70% more. So there's a big difference because you've raised the bar. So that being said, this unit gives 30% to not only himself and everybody else, and he's the inverse for the HP restriction. It's one below, which kind of same thing I was saying before. Couple hits, boom, now everybody gets 30%. It's not an unconditional one like Pandel's is, 30% to everybody, but that's basically the next best thing. You know, that's almost like a guarantee to get 80% off, because 80% is really just taking a couple hits from a boss, and you're literally within that range, and it's still a 50% stun rate for 2 turns. So, you know, still a really good stunner overall and really good supporting unit. So number 4. If I haven't pissed anybody off already by shafting Goku, I'm going to put Vegeta here. Actually, okay, so I'm going to say this. Number 4 and number 3 are basically the same slot, so take whichever one you want. Take it for however you want to interpret it, because I honestly couldn't decide for these two, because Vegeta is like the ultimate defensive unit. If it weren't for the turn restriction, he'd probably be the best stunner in my list. Reason being is because the passive, or second or third, it just depends. But, you know, that turn restriction really kind of screws him over, because he has a 50% stun rate for 2 turns, and he also has that 80% reduction for 7 turns. So this guy, literally, if he's not able to tank for whatever reason because passive isn't there, he can still stun for 2 turns, which is still very valuable. He's still a very, very, very good unit for that, because he's still one of the top stunners in the game, because not every stunner, as you saw, has a 50% clip to do it. So that being said, once again, amazing unit just overall. If he didn't have that turn restriction, he'd probably be a lot higher on this. Like I said, if you want to look at links, I'm trying not to look at the link skills, but he has amazing link skills as well for the most part. Standard Super Saiyan package, Golden Warrior, Super Saiyan, Fierce Battle. Overall, great unit. But, you know, people give him flack because they look at the turn restriction and think of him as Goku. But you got to realize he offers something that Goku doesn't offer. The Goku lowers defense, which is honestly minuscule. This guy actually stuns, which can save your butt. So he's a better unit than the Goku, in my opinion. I'd rather take a defensive unit that can stun versus just a hard hitter that loses his ability to hit hard. So, you know, let's go ahead and move into number 3, which, as I said, is basically a tie with the Vegeta. We are now looking at Vile and Violent Intelligence Turles. 50% stun rate, of course. High chance. Supreme damage, which the Goku and the Kid Buu don't have. They have extreme, by the way. I didn't mention that. That immediately puts them below these guys, because these guys are hitting for a supreme clip. Now, it's going to get kind of hard to decipher that in a minute after this. But nonetheless, I digress. 3 key to all allies and 20% attack for all allies. That's 20% for all allies is really, you know, noticeable because of the way that the game works. It's a big buff. It really is. It's a little more than Fierce Battle. That, and then the other link skills that you have active, that's a really nice buff. So I really don't have much to say about Turles. This guy's personally saved my butt several times. Really, really good unit. If you want to put Vegeta here, I mean, they're honestly a tie. I just chose to put Turles here because, as you guys know, I don't have the Vegeta on JP. I do have him on Global, but I don't have him on JP. So I'm a little bit biased towards Turles because I just feel like Turles is just such an amazing support unit. I run Turles on Mono Intelligence. I run him on Villains when I'm leading with the Zamasu lead, of course. You know, I've got a couple Goku Blacks there too. So it's like Turles is just one of those units that fits in a lot of places, and he has a lot of different uses because of his versatility with not only the link skills, which I'm trying to look away from, but the passives and the 50% clip to stun. Also can hit pretty hard and does have a farmable super attack. When he's on Mono Intelligence, he can hit for like anywhere between 180 to 240k. That's super attack 10. So very, very nice unit to have. And he does, you know, get a rebirth. Of course, we're looking at the rebirth. That's the better version. I mean, the other one still stuns for 50%, but better passive skill, a lot better passive skill. That 50% is but it is what it is. That being said, let's get into the top 2 here. Now, the top 2 is pretty funny. We're looking at Deep Blue Gaze General Blue. 70% stun rate for 2 turns on a specific enemy, and his passive gives him an 8% chance to stun the entire team for 1 turn. Well, there's a chance that both of those go off in 1 turn. I'll say that. I don't know how the stacking works. I assume that if you stun them with the passive, you'll still stun them for 2 turns, not 3 turns if you get a super attack. Nonetheless, he can stun everybody on the field. He also, let me stop there. I forgot to honorable mention Chaozus and the Jacos that automatically 100% stun chance everybody on the field, like people use them for the tournament. they're not viable here because that's a one-time stun, and I'm not looking at it from that perspective. So just wanted to put that out there. But that being said, he can stun everybody. 70% stun rate, which means he's going to stun most of the time, more than half the time, like every other unit in this. It's going to stun most of the time. I really don't have anything else to say. Just overall great unit. You notice how all these guys are intelligence? Intelligence can be the most stunny team if they wanted to be. All right, so number 1, same tab actually, General Blue. This guy actually has, according to this, I asked Zenrot for the validity of this. I'm just going to say 70%, but the Dokkan Wiki says 75% stun chance for 2 turns because it says ultra high versus whatever his was. Great chance. Like, I don't know the difference, but either way, you're going to take this guy above him because even if it's a 70% chance, he's still the better overall unit. He also has a chance to debuff the opponents, even though it's not a high chance, it's a medium chance. He's just a better unit because he's more or less like the Dokkan Awaken of the other one. He's got better stats and everything like that, so it really doesn't matter. The list for stunners is kind of open for interpretation because it just depends on what you utilize, what you own, more so than a lot of these other lists like best STR units and things like that, which aren't really as open for interpretation because you're looking at the units from a different perspective. But when it comes to units that are tied in a category, I tried to break them off, but I put General Blues, both of them, because they have the highest stun rate at the top of the list, and I thought that Turles and Vegeta were interchangeable. I thought that Goku would have came in at number 5 if his passive worked a different way, and Kid Buu barely sneaks into there in his place. Now, the other units that, like I said, hit, and those guys that have a rare chance on the super attack, and their passive stuns, you know, at a 40% clip for 1 turn, I just didn't feel like that was viable enough. Like, it could be useful, but I just didn't feel like it was viable enough. That includes Tech Whis and those guys like that. So anyways, let me know your thoughts down below. I'll be back soon, maybe tomorrow, with the top 5 orb changers in the game. So different type of video. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new to the channel, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace.